Silent invasion. The message arrived on a Tuesday. Captain Eliza Rice leaned forward in her chair at the Deep Space Monitoring Station, her eyes narrowing at the unusual pattern flickering across her screen. For 3 years, she had tracked cosmic background radiation and catalogued the usual symphony of stars and pulsars. But this was different. "Mason, come look at this," she called to her colleague, who abandoned his coffee to join her. The signal repeated in perfect intervals, too regular to be natural. It was coming from the Kuiper belt, just beyond Neptune's orbit, where nothing should be transmitting at all. "Is that?" Mason's voice trailed off. "Yes," Eliza confirmed. "First contact protocol. Now." Within hours, the message was decoded, a simple mathematical sequence followed by what could only be described as a warning. Earth wasn't alone, and something terrible was coming. 3 days later, the Vraxian scout ship entered Earth orbit, requesting emergency communication with Earth's leaders. The United Nations Security Council convened in an unprecedented closed session as the alien diplomat, an 8-foot-tall humanoid with silvery skin and 4 arms, addressed them through a translation device. "We are the Vraxians," the alien began, voice resonating throughout the chamber. "We come not as conquerors, but as refugees and messengers. The Void Eaters approach your system, just as they consumed ours." The Security Council chamber erupted in murmurs and hushed conversations. General Harlow of the United States Space Force leaned forward, his weathered face grim. "What exactly are these Void Eaters?" The Vraxians' large, multifaceted eyes seemed to dim. "They are ancient, perhaps as old as the universe itself. They consume energy, all energy. Stars, planets, life force. They leave nothing but cold, dark emptiness." Holographic projections appeared, showing entire star systems going dark one by one. Not exploding, not collapsing, simply fading to nothing, as if they had never existed. 37 species across 3 galactic arms have fallen. The Vraxian continued. "Some fought, some fled, all failed. We detected your radio signals centuries ago, but chose not to interfere with your development. Now we have no choice but to warn you." Dr. Maya Chen sat at the back of the room, invited as Earth's leading quantum physicist specializing in energy field manipulation, while politicians debated evacuation plans that were clearly impossible. Earth's population was too large and spacefaring technology too limited. Maya's mind raced with calculations. How do they consume energy? She interrupted, ignoring protocol. "What's their method?" The Vraxian turned to her, seeming surprised by the question. "They exist partially outside normal spacetime. They fold themselves around matter, creating a dimensional pocket that siphons energy across the quantum barrier." Maya nodded, already formulating theories. "And what defenses have been tried?" "Everything," the Vraxian replied, defeat evident. "Energy shields, physical barriers, gravitational distortion fields. Nothing stops them. They simply unfold differently to bypass obstacles." That night, as emergency sessions continued and governments began preparing their populations for the impossible, Maya worked in her lab beneath MIT. Her team of 12 scientists and engineers huddled around displays, running simulations on what she called quantum reflection barriers. "It won't work," said Dr. Patel, shaking his head. "If these Void Eaters exist partially outside our dimension, we can't just build a wall." Maya smiled faintly. "We don't build a wall. We build a mirror." She pulled up her theoretical model. "Look, if they fold spacetime to create a dimensional pocket, we create a counterfold that reflects the pocket back on itself." "That's impossible," Patel argued. "The energy requirements alone would be astronomical." Maya finished for him. "But not if we use the quantum entanglement lattice I've been developing. We can create a cascading field effect with minimal initial energy input." 2 weeks later, Maya presented her proposal to the newly formed Earth Defense Council. General Harlow looked skeptical. "Dr. Chen, You're asking us to bet humanity's survival on untested technology, based on theories that were controversial even before the Vraxians arrived. Maya stood her ground. Every conventional defense has failed against these entities. We need unconventional solutions. The Chinese representative, Admiral Zhu, nodded slowly. The doctor makes a valid point. What do we have to lose by attempting this? Time and resources, snapped the Russian general. We should be focusing on evacuation of key personnel and knowledge preservation. Maya's patience snapped. Evacuate to where exactly? The Void Eaters consume entire star systems. There's nowhere to run. The debate raged for hours until President Morales of the United Nations raised her hand for silence. We will pursue multiple avenues simultaneously. Dr. Chen, you have authorization for your project. General Harlow, continue coordination of conventional defenses. Admiral Zhou, oversee the contingency evacuation planning. As the meeting adjourned, the Vraxian ambassador approached Maya. Your species is unusual, they observed. Faced with extinction, most retreat or despair. You innovate. Maya shrugged. It's what we do. Construction of the quantum reflection array began immediately. Every major nation contributed resources and personnel. Former enemies worked side by side, political differences forgotten in the face of extinction. The array would consist of thousands of satellites deployed throughout the solar system, creating a web of quantum-entangled particles that could theoretically generate a system-wide defensive field. 30 days into construction, the first attack came. Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon and home to humanity's largest off-Earth research station, went dark. All 3,000 scientists and support staff gone in an instant. The automated defense systems didn't even register a warning before communication ceased. From Earth, telescopes caught the moment. A strange, shimmering darkness that passed over the moon like a shadow, leaving nothing but empty space where the research station had been. In the aftermath, panic spread. Religious groups proclaimed the end times. Riots broke out in major cities. Military forces were deployed to maintain order as governments implemented emergency rationing and curfews. Maya worked through it all, catching sleep in 2-hour increments as her team refined the array design. The Vraxian engineers provided insights into exotic materials that could enhance the quantum field, but even they seemed doubtful of success. No one has ever approached the problem this way, one Vraxian engineer admitted. Our species focused on physical barriers and energy weapons. Sometimes fresh eyes see new solutions, Maya replied, not looking up from her calculations. The attack on Europa changed everything. The timeline for the array's completion was cut from 6 months to 6 weeks. Every manufacturing facility on Earth was repurposed. Children assembled components in classrooms. Retirees returned to work. Humanity united with a singular purpose: survival. 52 days after the Vraxians' arrival, the first wave of satellites launched. Maya watched from mission control as rockets from every spacefaring nation blazed into the sky, carrying humanity's last hope. As the deployment continued, the long-range sensors detected movement at the edge of the solar system. The Void Eaters had arrived in force. The human solution. The command center beneath Geneva fell silent as the massive display showed the approaching darkness. It wasn't a fleet or even distinct entities, more like patches of emptiness that moved with purpose, consuming small asteroids and space debris as they came. How much of the array is operational? General Harlow demanded, his voice tight. 63%. Maya replied, fingers flying across her console. We need at least 80 for system-wide coverage. We don't have time. Admiral Zhou stated flatly. They'll reach Mars in 6 hours. Maya made a decision. We focus the coverage. Jupiter's orbit and inward. We sacrifice the outer planets to save Earth. No one objected. The brutal calculus of survival demanded such choices. The Martian colonies were evacuated. A frantic rush as every available spacecraft made desperate runs between the Red Planet and Earth. Not everyone would make it out. The lottery system for evacuation priority led to heartbreaking scenes as families were separated, some left behind to face the approaching void. Colonial Governor Mbeki of Mars made the last transmission before boarding the final evacuation ship. "We are humanity. Some of us may die, but our species will survive. Stand strong, Earth. Mars stands with you to the end." As the Void Eaters approached Mars orbit, Maya's team completed the reconfiguration of the quantum reflection array. The satellites now formed a concentrated web from Jupiter inward. The density of the quantum field increased to compensate for the missing coverage. Activation in 3, 2, 1. Maya initiated the sequence. Across the solar system, thousands of satellites simultaneously generated quantum fields, creating overlapping patterns of energy that were invisible to normal sensors but formed a complex multidimensional barrier. The power draw was enormous. Every nation on Earth experienced rolling blackouts as the planetary grid strained to feed energy to the orbital uplink stations. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported the sensor officer. Maya held her breath. The theoretical models showed this would work, but theory and reality often diverged. On the main screen, they watched as the first of the Void Eaters, a patch of absolute darkness against the starfield, approached the invisible barrier at Mars orbit. It paused, seeming to sense the unusual energy pattern before it. Then it struck. The quantum field flared visibly as contact was made, a rippling wave of blue-white energy spreading outward from the impact point. For a moment, it seemed to be working as the Void Eater recoiled. Then alarms blared throughout the command center. "Field integrity dropping in sectors 12 through 17, called out Dr. Patel. "The quantum links are destabilizing." Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, making real-time adjustments, rerouting power to reinforcement nodes, increasing entanglement density. On the screen, the Void Eater pressed against the barrier again. And this time, the field began to tear. It wasn't so much breaking through as folding space around the barrier, creating a dimensional bypass. "It's adapting," Maya realized, just like the Vraxians warned. General Harlow slammed his fist on the console. "All conventional defenses, fire at will." From Earth and orbital platforms, thousands of missiles launched, each carrying the most destructive warheads humanity had developed. Nuclear, antimatter, experimental quantum disruption weapons, all converging on the point where the Void Eater was breaching the field. The explosions were visible from Earth, a silent light show as humanity unleashed its fury. When the flashes faded and the sensors recalibrated, the Void Eater remained, completely unaffected. "No effect," reported the weapons officer, voice hollow. In the silence that followed, Maya had a realization. "We're thinking about this wrong," she said suddenly. "We're treating the quantum field as a barrier. But it's not. It's an interface." She turned to the Vraxian ambassador, who had remained silent throughout the crisis. "You said they fold space to create a dimensional pocket that siphons energy, right?" The Vraxian nodded. "Yes. The pocket exists partially in our dimension and partially in theirs. Then we don't reflect them," Maya said, her mind racing ahead of her words. "We pull them through completely." Her fingers were already reconfiguring the field parameters. "If we reverse the quantum polarity and create a resonance cascade, we can force the dimensional pocket to fully materialize in our reality. That would expose them to our physical laws," the Vraxian realized, multifaceted eyes widening. "No species has ever attempted this." "Because everyone tried to keep them out," Maya replied. "We're going to pull them in." The reconfiguration took precious minutes as more Void Eaters joined the first, pressing against the weakening barrier. Mars hung in the balance, its evacuation still incomplete. "New configuration ready," Maya announced, initiating quantum resonance in 3, 2, 1. The field changed character, its energy signature shifting from defensive to actively drawing the Void Eaters inward. On the display, the patches of darkness seemed to shudder, then began to take more defined shape as they were pulled fully into normal spacetime. "It's working," Dr. Pidal exclaimed. The Void Eaters, now partially visible as writhing, geometric shapes that hurt the eye to look upon, began to lose cohesion. Exposed fully to the laws of physics they had evolved to bypass, they couldn't maintain their structure. "They're destabilizing," Maya observed, watching the readings. "Without the ability to exist partially out of phase with our reality, they can't sustain their energy pattern." The first Void Eater collapsed in on itself, imploding with a burst of radiation that temporarily overwhelmed the sensors. When the displays cleared, where the entity had been was now only empty space, truly empty, not the unnatural void of the creatures. "All units, concentrate fire on the materialized entities," ordered General Harlow. This time, humanity's weapons found purchase. The conventional armaments tore into the now vulnerable Void Eaters, accelerating their collapse. One by one, they imploded or scattered into fragments that quickly dissipated. The battle for Mars' orbit lasted 17 hours. When it was over, the quantum array was severely damaged, hundreds of satellites destroyed by the strain of maintaining the reversed field. But Mars was saved, and with it, the thousands of colonists who hadn't yet evacuated. "They're retreating," announced the sensor officer as the remaining Void Eaters withdrew, moving back toward the outer solar system. The command center erupted in cheers and tears. Maya slumped in her chair, exhausted beyond words. The Vraxian ambassador approached, placing one of their 4 hands on her shoulder. "In all our history," they said quietly, "no species has ever driven back the Void Eaters. You have done what we thought impossible." Maya shook her head. "We got lucky." "No," the Vraxian insisted. "Your approach was unique. While advanced civilizations relied on complex technology and brute force, you understood the fundamental nature of the threat and adapted accordingly. This is remarkable." In the days that followed, the array was rebuilt and expanded. The retreating Void Eaters were pursued and eliminated one by one. Word spread through the handful of surviving alien civilizations that humanity, a young, barely spacefaring species, had accomplished what ancient races could not. 3 months after the Battle of Mars, a delegation from the Galactic Council arrived in Earth orbit. The Council had existed for millennia, but had been in retreat for centuries as the Void Eaters expanded their consumption. Now they came to meet the species that had changed everything. In the UN General Assembly Hall, representatives from 17 alien civilizations stood before humanity's leaders. The Chief Counselor, a being of living crystal, addressed the assembly. "For too long, the advanced species of this galaxy have watched younger civilizations struggle alone, offering minimal assistance and claiming non-interference principles. The truth is, we were preserving ourselves at your expense." Murmurs rippled through the human delegates. "Humanity has shown us our error," the counselor continued. "Your species, combining innovation with determination and a unique perspective, has accomplished what we could not. The Void Eaters are not invincible. They can be fought and defeated." The counselor paused, crystal form shifting in what might have been embarrassment. "We come not only to thank you, but to ask for your help. Will you share your methods and join us in reclaiming what was lost?" President Morales rose to respond. "Earth has always stood alone. We've faced our challenges without outside assistance, and we've grown stronger for it." She paused, looking across the assembly. "But we understand now that isolation is a luxury none can afford. Humanity will join your council, and together we will ensure that no more worlds fall to darkness." Maya, sitting among the scientific delegation, thought about how far they had come. From a species confined to one planet to defenders of the galaxy in less than a year. The path ahead would be difficult. The Void Eaters were wounded but not extinct, and rebuilding what was lost would take generations. But if there was one thing humanity had proven, it was that impossible was just a word. When the universe needed heroes, humanity had answered the call. And they would do so again and again, for as long as stars burned in the night sky. As the Earth's new fleet prepared for its first mission beyond the solar system, Maya stood on the observation deck of the flagship, aptly named Defiance. The stars stretched out before them, countless worlds waiting to be saved. Captain Reyes, promoted after her discovery of the initial signal, joined her at the viewport. "Ready, Dr. Chen." Maya nodded, thinking of all those who had sacrificed to get them here. "Let's go make some history." The Defiance engaged its engines, leading humanity's first interstellar expedition, not as conquerors or explorers, but as protectors. The universe had called, and humanity had answered. It was what they did best.